Hi, my name is Abhinav Lohia. I'm the Director of Global Business Development at Golden Gate Global, an EB-5 licensed regional center based out of San Francisco, California. I'm a former US immigration attorney and also a licensed US finance professional. In this video, I will be discussing about performing due diligence on EB-5 regional centers. Disclaimer: the information provided on this presentation is for information purposes only and does not constitute legal or securities advice. Performing due diligence on EB-5 regional centers. Today, I will be covering what is a regional center, what does a regional center do, how are EB-5 investments structured, and performing due diligence in terms of immigration track record, investment performance, fiduciary duty, exposure to litigation, and compliance with laws. As an EB-5 investor, you may find that researching on a regional center and a project is quite daunting because everyone claims to be the best in the business. So to filter out the good from the bad, reading between the lines, I've put together this video. Now, a regional center is an entity that's been approved by USCIS to sponsor EB-5 projects. This license to sponsor EB-5 projects doesn't mean much except that you have a driver's license, but whether you're a good or a bad driver, that's on you. So it is very important to perform your own diligence and rely on professionals that specialize in performing due diligence. Now, what does a regional center do? So the first step is obviously scouting projects. And then regional center retains professionals to perform due diligence. It requires attorneys, economists, and real estate experts, to name a few. When a regional center performs due diligence, they look at multiple factors. A, whether the project is in a targeted employment area, that is a rural or a higher employment area, so that it qualifies for the minimum investment amount of $800,000. Second, of course, EB-5 is not only about your immigration, but about American job creation. So then the regional centers have to work with economists to figure out how many jobs will be created by that project. And then you have to look into the strength of the developer, do a market analysis of the project, whether there is a demand for the project or not. And if there is, whether it'll be successful financially. What are the costs involved? What are the financial projections? So regional centers do their homework for anywhere from 3 months to a year on a project before they present it to USCIS. So the next step is, once all the due diligence is done, the documents have been drafted by the attorneys, the economists have submitted their report, the real estate experts have sent their financial projections. All this gets put together in a package, a business plan is drafted, and it is filed with USCIS. Once this is done, then the regional center goes out and raises capital one by one from each EB-5 investor up to 800,000 or $1,050,000 if the project is not in a targeted employment area. Once the capital is raised, then the regional center deploys this capital into the project. And we have to track spending of how the money is being spent. It should be done in accordance with the business plan. It should create 10 American jobs. Otherwise, simply investing and not creating those jobs in a manner that was submitted in the business plan would result in a denial. Then regional centers also they represent the investors, not the borrower. So it is the regional center's duty to provide updates on the project, how the borrower is doing, how the funds are being used, how many jobs are being created, send photos to investors to show them what's the progress on the project. Obviously, you get, while your return on investment is a green card, there is minimal interest rate earned on your investment. So it's about 1% per annum. If it's a debt model, maybe 2 or 3% if it's a preferred equity model. Then the regional centers disburse the annual interests. Also, the most important part, we have to make sure that the borrower repays on time. A typical loan term in case of a debt model is minimum 5 years, maximum 7 years. It is the responsibility of the regional center to make sure that borrower is repaying these funds. If the borrower fails to repay, again, regional centers are representing the investors. It is the job of the regional center to take necessary action against the borrower in case of a default. As an EB-5 investor, you can go up against the developer or a borrower, but guess what? If there is a default, you're the only person fighting against a billion-dollar company. Your odds are pretty low compared to if a regional center files a class action against the borrower with all the investors. The likelihood of success is high. The cost of litigation is lower per person. And finally, regional centers have the responsibility to redeploy the funds. Now, redeployment happens when the borrower repays the funds, but you as an EB-5 investor have not qualified. Let me explain. A lot of times the loan term ends or a borrower repays early. However, most of the documents, the way they are drafted, will repay you the capital once you've spent 2 years as a conditional green card holder. If you have not reached that stage, your funds need to be reinvested. And regional centers are responsible for that. And this is and that is why it makes it even more important to invest in a trustworthy regional center, because they have the power to control your funds once the borrower repays. So moving on, this is the structure of the investment. Regional centers are independent entities mostly, and they are usually a lending institution or a financing institution for a project. So EB-5 investors, they transfer their funds into an escrow account. This escrow account belongs to the new commercial enterprise or NCE. This is usually in the form of a limited partnership or an LLC. Your funds end up going to an escrow account. Regional center executives don't have access to these funds to buy their personal belongings or go on a vacation. This is held by a major bank. From here, the money can either go to the borrower or go back to the investors. So in case of a debt model, the money goes in as a loan, and the borrower uses this money to construct the asset. Once the asset is complete and stabilizes, usually they refinance this loan, repay it back to the escrow account, and then it goes back to the EB-5 investors. In case of preferred equity, there is no such loan term per se, but usually conditions are the same, that the borrower in 5 to 7 years has to repay the money to the escrow account, and it goes back to the investors. I think the critical factor between the difference between a preferred equity model and a debt model is that in a preferred equity case, you're junior to all creditors, whereas in a debt model, you can know your position. If you're a mezzanine lender, that means you're junior to the bank and senior to all the equity and preferred equity holders in the project. So now, a few things here. As you can see, regional centers are representing the investors here. So the borrower or person who's attracted your preferred equity needs to come through on the repayment. Otherwise, it's the regional center that can sue them, representing all these investors, which is really important. The other thing to note is that usually, not in all cases, but usually repayment is done through refinance of the asset, which is a much lower bar compared to if you are getting repaid from sale of an asset. Then you are more exposed to the macroeconomic factors. So just to keep a few things in mind when you're investing. So performing your due diligence. There are a lot of things that attorneys and real estate experts can take care of for you, but there are some common sense questions you can ask the regional center. First thing is knowing the location. Why this is important is, hey, you are investing with a firm, right? Go meet their employees, visit their office, see who really operates the whole business. And it's just like going to a bank or a wealth manager, just checking out the location. This will also tell you whether they are managing these projects in the location that they are familiar with, or is it in some remote location that is away from their headquarters and they are just relying on outside experts. The second thing, which in my opinion is important, is years in operation. I would usually tell my clients to invest in a regional center that's been around for 8 to 10 years minimum, because if a regional center has been around for 8 to 10 years, that means they've seen all the stages of EB-5 application, which are one, obviously attracting investment, and also getting conditional green cards for their investors, but also unconditional green cards, prepayment, and maybe redeployment. So there needs to be a track record for you to be able to judge whether the regional center is right for you, because this is investment and immigration. Your success of investment is when you get your principal back. Your success of immigration is when you get your unconditional green card. So that's the measure of also a regional center's success. So, you need to ask the amount of EB-5 funds they've raised, the number of EB-5 projects that have been sponsored by the regional center, the number of green cards have been approved, number of unconditional green cards that have been approved, the number of EB-5 investors that have been repaid. This will give you an idea about the experience of a regional center. And of course, if it's a new regional center, they will not have a track record. It doesn't mean they're bad. We just don't know if they're good or bad. So after asking all the questions about the track record of a regional center, it is time to ask some negative questions. To start with, are there any projects that received a project denial from USCIS? Now, you have worked very hard to put together $800,000. Your attorneys have worked hard in documenting your source of funds, but there are certain things beyond your control. And one of them is whether the project has been properly submitted, the business plan for the project. Now, if the project gets denied, it doesn't matter how kosher your source of funds are. And therefore, it's important to ask these questions, whether there has been any project failure, which has resulted in a negative impact for all the investors. The next thing to ask is, are there projects that fail to create all the jobs for investors? Now, the worst thing that can happen to you in an EB-5 petition is that you invest the money, you get an approval of your conditional green card, you get your money back, but now you just got a denial of your unconditional green card. Your 7-8 years journey will come to a halt, and now you need to figure out another non-immigrant visa, or you have to leave the United States, which after 8 or 9 years, you're caught off guard, and it can really unsettle your life. The next thing to ask is number of projects in which investors didn't receive part or whole of their invested EB-5 funds upon the expiration of the loan term. Now, everyone understands this is not only about immigration. Yes, you want that green card, but you don't want to donate your $800,000. So it is important to ask regional centers this question. Are there any projects that defaulted in the past? What happened? Did you sue the developer? Did you sue the borrower to recover the money? What was the result of that litigation? Or what were the actions that were taken? The next thing you need to ask them is how many investors lost their capital? And this will tell you whether the regional center itself is exposed to any kind of litigation now or in the future. Because if you've raised $100 million from 100 plus investors, they could very well sue you if there is some wrongdoing at the part of the regional center. The next thing is to find out whether any projects were terminated prior to completion. Again, this is all about job creation and getting your money back, and termination of a project prior to completion impacts both. There could be an instance where not enough jobs were created. Also, if the project wasn't completed, A, there could be cost overruns. B, it could have stalled because of litigation. C, the developer just ran out of money. Now, in this case, well, if you're lucky, all the jobs are created. If you're not, maybe not all jobs are created, and your unconditional green card may get impacted. It may also impact repayment of your capital. So it's a very important question to ask. Now, EB-5 industry is regulated by both USCIS and Securities Commission. So another good way to figure out whether regional center is worth your investment is whether in the past they've broken any laws, whether they have failed to meet the requirements of immigration law, or they've not complied with securities laws. Have there been any sanctions, fines, settlements? So all these things will help you understand the functioning of a regional center, which is often overlooked by EB-5 investors. Most regional centers are great, and it's about deciding between a Mercedes, a BMW, or an Audi. But sometimes it so happens that there are regional centers that are not up to the mark, and the cars crash and burn. So just be careful about that. I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for watching.